We read yesterday these three lines pregnant with deep meanings. It is decreed that Satyavan must die. What else there is written in her soul. So it seems that there are things which are fixed. Sri Aurobindo notes it. The hour is fixed, chosen the fatal stroke. This is decreed. This is something fixed. It cannot be changed. And yet it can be changed. There is something which is written in her soul. It is that writing is illegible, mute. That's where things can change. It reminded me of the famous Serenity prayer of the... actually, I think he died previous century, the American theologian. The prayer is, I'm sure, well known. It's one of my favorites. O Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It is a very sobering prayer given to me when I cleared my graduation in medicine. It's a very beautiful prayer, and it's many layers of meaning. It's very unfortunate it is used only for alcoholics, treating alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous. But it's a very profound prayer. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. There are things we cannot change. The hour is fixed. The way Satyavan is going to die is chosen. It cannot be changed. The courage to change the things I can. There are things which can be yet changed. Even through the passage of death, one can pluck out immortality. One can enter into its darkness and bring back immortality. And the wisdom to know the difference. Very often we try changing the things that cannot be changed, like another person's behavior. And we accept certain things which actually we should be changing, but we don't have the courage to change. Like our attitude, we accept it with great serenity and say, this is what I am, nature has made me, God has made me. So many justifications. Or now we have one more, karma, my karma, therefore I am built the way I am. So we reverse the whole prayer, and so we don't know really the difference, and that creates so much chaos. But there are things which can be changed. Even the most outer circumstances and events can be changed, but there is a way and a process. It cannot be done by wishful thinking, that we have been told very clearly, or by simply tears. This comes again in Sri Aurobindo's famous poem, Love and Death. When Ruru loses his loved one, Priyamvada, and he is crying, he is full of agony. So the God of love appears and says, what do you really want? You want your loved one back? Yes. You can't do it with tears. It's not accepted as an offering or a sacrifice. The gods don't heed to it. So what do they listen to? The gods obey only one thing, the law of sacrifice. This is the most ancient law. So Ruru, of course, has to sacrifice half his life, and so he gets back his loved one. Savitri makes a much greater sacrifice. She sacrifices the entire ego self, as we will see subsequently, so that everything in a being can be occupied simply by God. That is what gives us the power to change. And it's the greatest act of courage. It is to surrender the ego. It's very difficult. All other surrenders are easy. It's easiest is to surrender patch of hairs on your head. That is the easiest thing. All that we need is to go to Tirupati, and they are sold. It's quite a good market. But the only thing is that if you surrender it in a market, you will get some money. But if you do it in a temple, you will get merit, which you can encash later on for whatever. Normally it's for money. So that is the easiest surrender. Equally easy surrender is surrendering one day meal, doing fast and getting some propitiating the gods. So this is other kinds of surrender. or surrender things which are useless. Oh, this is of no use to me, let me give it to the gods, maybe to those whom we love, maybe to the Guru. That has been also cleared by Nachiketa in Kathopanishad, that this offering has no meaning. Cattle who are worn out and old, why are you giving them? O king, this is not the way to give. If you have to give something beautiful, something precious, something which you really love and care for. Otherwise, it's not really sacrifice. The mother puts it very simply, till it pinches a little. That's a sign that, it's really an offering. Otherwise, it's okay. We do it and God laughs and accepts it also. That's His magnanimity. He may not need it or use it, but that's one part. But most important surrender is surrender of the character, the way we are. Surrender of the ego self, our little personality, which we don't want to let go. But that is the path, that is the way that we can house God's force. Surrender of our individual will can help us to align to the divine will. Now, this surrender of our individual will doesn't mean that we will not have any will. Obviously, that becomes a tamasic surrender. But we'll apply the will, but no more with egoistic aims in view. So first we surrender the results of whatever our efforts are. And then we aspire that may this will get aligned more and more to the divine will. So that way, slowly, a time comes when there is a power to change. So this change cannot come by wishful thinking. And that's what we have been revealed. A few lines above on page 459. And then comes where we had stopped yesterday. In vain thou mournest that Satyavan must die. His death is a beginning of greater life. Death is the spirit's opportunity. So what is the great opportunity hidden in death? And it applies at every level. To rebuild, basically. And death comes precisely because whatever we have built, whether it be psychological, our mental body full of our thought forms, opinions, views, over a period of time they become like fixed rigid structures. Or it may be the vital body full of habits, desires, and they have become formations and they trap us. This is how as we grow old and old. And we are unable to change. They are the things which, whether we have built or destiny has brought it, but they trap us. They are like a prison house. And beyond a point, we are not able to break free from them. And of course, our body, which simply because of habit, the cells die and they cannot, after a while, rejuvenate themselves. And we become prey to our own making. So death comes as an opportunity to rebuild things on an entirely new basis. Maybe we thought, oh, that's something which I don't like, but we have not really experienced it. Maybe we may like it, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's an opportunity for us to grow. And we get a chance to enter into a new body, in a new environment. So it's really an opportunity, it's not a cause for grief. And the soul chooses all kinds of experiences to go through, things we cannot even imagine. In one of the places, the mother notes a child who was 4-year-old was overrun by a car. And mother said this child wanted only this experience for which he had taken birth. Can we imagine that this? Now when I had read it, it had hit me very hard. My God, such things exist. Probably mother must have noted. I'm sure that she noted that, he has accepted it because I have said so, but he needs something more concrete. And the concrete thing came through a couple. I'm sure some of us may have heard this story that while a car was entering near Oroshikha, it met with a couple with their child were walking toward the ashram and a car entered through Oroshikha and the child was overrun and he died. The child was about 7 years old. I'm sure some of us may have heard this story. This happened maybe some 10 years back or around that time. It was a very tragic incident where the parents and the child were coming to the ashram for the first time. So to make it even more... So obviously there are different ways people react to such incidents. Now, strangely, the couple landed up in the dispensary one day. I didn't know about it. And they had 2 children subsequently, and there's some problems. That's not so important. So after a while, the parents revealed to me that whole story, particularly the wife. She said, made a very interesting observation. She said, I keep telling him that these 2 children are mother's grace. They started coming to Pondicherry after that. Now, till then I didn't know. And then I said, yes, of course, it's very nice to, that children are divine grace. Then she said, that's what I keep telling him. That okay, one child was lost. Then the story came. So it came in retrospect. But what came later was even more interesting. Without my asking, this whole story came through them. That they were in Vellore for treatment of, I've forgotten now, the man or the wife. They were in Vellore. And the boy, 7-year-old boy, kept pressing, I want to go to Pondicherry. Let's go to Pondicherry. They were not keen. He literally dragged them to Pondicherry. They said, okay, he's so keen. Anyway, it's a nice place, good tourist destination. Ashram is also there. Let's go. So they came for that. And as he entered Pondicherry, he said, I don't want to go from here. I don't want to go from here. I'm telling you exactly something which I have heard myself. There is no intermediary to this story. Not a word of exaggeration. I don't want to go. And they said, how you will, we have to go back. So they were a bit worried that he has hardly entered and he's saying that I don't want to go. Now when we know this background and see this story, then it gives a totally different picture. Now there are incidents where we don't know this background because maybe the person has not revealed what was going on inside, or maybe the person was not even conscious of what was going on inside. And that's where we read these lines, that there is a meaning in each curve and line. It's not just some random game. There is something which is happening which you don't understand. And death is the spirit's opportunity. The opportunity to rebuild along a new basis. Dilip Kumar Roy's famous letter, why did such a fine singer die at such a young age, at 21? I think Mrinalini Bose or something. No, Uma Bose, that's right. She had died. She had died of throat cancer at a young age, such a beautiful voice. And so he asked him, why did such a fine flower fade away so soon? And Sri Aurobindo, through that reply, reveals the whole secret. That book subsequently, that whole letter got published under a small booklet, The Riddle of the World. What is it? Why these things happen? And after revealing the whole thing, like a whole Gita, he says, well, then last 4 lines are about Uma Bose, that she had reached a great degree of sattvic development in her nature. And she wanted to now take a leap, which was not possible in this life. Because sattva itself can be great bondage, and sometimes there is a terrible anguish to take a leap. And that leap comes by cutting abruptly all the past bonds, breaking free from the shell and taking a new birth. Now, all these things happen. We don't see it. And naturally we feel grief, not for the person who has departed, but for ourselves. Grief is never for the person who has departed. This part is very, very clear. Though we say, oh, bichara. After death, there is no bichara. It's gone. He's no more bichara. He's no more somebody you need to, feel sorry about. He's gone. He has gone beyond even if it is 50, 60, 70, whatever age, 20, it's gone. That person is not bichara. But all his memories, all our association, all our attachments naturally make us suffer. So that is understandable. But it's not for that person that we grieve. So as far as the individual is concerned, death is always an opportunity. But as far as those who are left behind, they suffer because of attachment which is born out of ignorance. So it's not some cruel person who devised death so that people may suffer. We suffer because of, we have read it in the beginning, wherever ignorance is, there pain too must come. We don't see the journey before, we don't see the deeper things going on at a given point of time. We do not know what is, coming in the forefront. Therefore we suffer. One last story before we move on. Again, with regard to mother, when a whole family was brought here by one man, he was the person who turned, and then almost the entire family came, except maybe one brother. And then he had to go back because he was feeling he had some, for some reason, and then he had appendicitis. And he had to be operated, and mother sent a message, don't get operated. In general, she was not very favorable to violent methods on the body. But then, pressure of people prevailed, and he was operated and he died. Young age of 47. It's not a happy thing to happen. And now other members have come anyways, but his wife is left behind by along with a 3-year-old child. So when the lady goes to mother is waiting with her arms wide open, and she holds her in her embrace and says, do you want to see him? Now she had not expected this reply. Mother didn't give any philosophy that you should be detached, this is how life is, nothing. She just understood her sorrow and said, do you want to see him? This only a yogi can say. Nobody can say this. People normally will give a nice philosophy, quote from the Gita, things like that. Then she says, he is very safe with me, in peace, resting. Then after a while she says, no mother, if he is in peace and resting, I don't want to disturb him. Very good. And then other things happened which were very, very touching. Since we are at the story, we can just finish it. So she offered all her wealth to mother, and mother said, no, you keep it with you. Said, no mother, if I need anything, you will give me. She said, what if I am not there, and if you need it, will you ask others? She knew that she is a lady full of self-dignity. She said, no, that I'll never do. That's why I'm telling you, keep it from me. You have given to me, now I am giving it back to you. This story was an eye-opener. How varied were mother's ways, and it's impossible to try to quote her or take one example and one story and make a universal law. She really was not bound to any rule, any law, any way of being. She could use any of them. That's why she said, I belong to no nation, no civilization, no race. I belong only to the divine. I serve no master but the divine himself. So here we hear these two magnificent lines. His death is a beginning of greater life. Narad doesn't reveal or doesn't know what may happen, but this is fixed that he is going to die. Either which way, it will be a beginning of a greater life. Sometime people return from death. This too the mother speaks at length in agenda, that there is a moment after death when you still have a choice of coming back. And she says, this is what the scientists are now discovering. And now we see number of near-death experiences have come. Anita Moorjani was the famous one. Then came one neurophysician. In all these experiences, when the person has come back, the person has changed for good. Something has changed. It's amazing. I mean, the way things change after that experience of crossing the critical border and then returning. So even either ways, either after death taking a new body or getting back, is always creates a change, and a big change. His death is a beginning of greater life. Death is the spirit's opportunity. And this is true of all crises at every level. That every crisis is a cry for change. But it overwhelms us. We succumb under it. We break down under it. And we suffer. But it's not meant to do that. It's meant to evolve us at a rapid pace. As Sri Aurobindo says, it's a tunnel dug through emergency. It's meant to really suddenly help us take a leap. But we get overwhelmed and we suffer. That's a habit of nature. That's a different part. A vast intention has brought two souls close. Normally we feel, happily married ever after. This is a small intention. to be happily married ever after is a very small intention. That they lived happily, they had a nice house, they had children who all studied in Harvard, they could at least buy a Mercedes a few years before dying. These are petty things. Vast intention, something which long spaces of time will unfold. Look at Mother and Sri Aurobindo's life. So many lives they have been together in different ways, in different forms. Way back, as possibly Agastya and Lopamudra. When Agastya tells Lopamudra that how long we have to dig into the subconscious, 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 years back. Then another where Mother suddenly recollects that great vision where she was pushed on the edge and drowned in the water. And she remembers that whole thing came back to her. All these things, so many experiences one has to go through. And at the end of it is that great embodiment of love for which humanity is being prepared through so many tests, tribulations, trials, all kinds of things. Vast intention. Vast intention, we think it's just about small things. A vast intention has brought two souls close, and love and death conspire towards one great end. One of the greatest example of this line is Christ himself. Christ embodying love. Mother has said he embodied the divine love. And at the same time, death, crucifixion. Strangely and paradoxically, the Roman Empire of that time believed that by doing it, they will finish Christ. They immortalized him. That's how Sri Aurobindo says of all the four great events in history, one of them is crucifixion of Christ. Christ from his cross humanized Europe. And had he not been crucified, love was still there. But probably the power that was released at that point, when in a moment of apocalypse, Christ says, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. It requires not just courage, something extraordinary. What plane of consciousness from which one can utter at the moment of crucifixion to all those who are the so-called enemies, forgive them. Now, this is amazing. So, both the love that he embodies and the death that he undergoes, eventually we are meant to fulfill the great mission. Love and death conspire towards one great end because it is the same evolutionary energy. Love moves wearing the mask of death. This has been also told to us in the beginning. Love came to her, hiding the shadow death. It's waiting. Death, what does death do? It separates. So again and again we see death is not the opposite of life. Death is a process of life. A small little room in the huge mansion of life. A room through which we have to pass to once again enter into life. It's not the opposite of life. So what is the opposite of death? It's love. Death divides and love unites. So this is at all levels it operates. And love and death conspire towards one great end. For out of danger and pain, heaven bliss shall come. Time's unforeseen event, God's secret plan. How beautiful. So, we can never say, oh, how unfortunate. This word is ignorance. Time's unforeseen event. And at least in my practice, I have seen such things which are really unbelievable. And I think I have told this story of a couple who lost, they had 4 children, all 4 died. One day in a same tragedy. Grown up. And it was done in such a way that as if they were all 4 drawn together. They were not meant to be together. And they were drawn together by some kind of, we may use the word adverse fate. At one level, yes. And they drown. And drowned in a way that you feel really is the silliest way to drown. And they are playing on a, clearing on the sea, and suddenly the sea increases, surrounds from all sides. Suddenly they realize that they are engulfed by the sea. They didn't know how to swim. And people on the shore were shouting at them and they didn't listen. And by the time they realized, the sea had surrounded, and that mound becomes lesser and lesser till ultimately they 4 drown. Nothing, nobody could save. This is strange. And after this death, The two of them who had been long wanting to come here and take a different course in life, suddenly come here, of course, filled with grief. Because their younger child had told them, why don't you both plan a trip to Pondicherry? You have not been going out anywhere for long. Got them a ticket. So they came. I just couldn't hear the story. I mean, it was too much to take that story. And all that I could say was just go and pray to Mother. There is nothing else. They prayed, and so beautifully they have not just opened towards Mother and Sri Aurobindo, dedicated their life. Something which we would think would not happen. Normally, the response would be, oh, there is no God. But look, soul can take these challenges and change so radically and completely. I know them. I have followed their life now for so many years. So, such things when you see, you wonder, time's unforeseen event, God's secret plan. This world was not built with random bricks of chance. There is nothing like chance. There is nothing like, random events. Random events, scientists say, because they don't know the lines that connect the dots. They don't know the deeper forces at work. They don't know the future that awaits the soul. There is a poem of Sri Aurobindo, The Lost Boat. And when tsunami came and a lot of people were, of course, Pondicherry was saved, this part, but that part, all around there was devastation. So people were wondering, oh my God. And literally that time this poem came very handy. So along with an article I had posted that poem where Sri Aurobindo says that he sees a boat going through the horizon, and then he says that, it's a poem that the boat sinks and there is grief. But how the person who was in the boat travels to distant lands, is born elsewhere, and how a new journey is beginning. So we don't understand that way at all because we don't have the vision. We are blind. So, but this is not simply a random play. A blind God is not destiny's architect, because Queen has asked this question, where then is the soul's security? So here is the answer, that here is the soul's security. We are not alone. This comes even in secret knowledge. Yet a secret spiritual aid is there, alive in a dead, rotating universe. We whirl not here upon a casual globe, abandoned to a task beyond our force. So, and this whole passage ends with, what should we do? Whatever the appearance, we must bear. When nothing we can see but drift and bail, a mighty guidance leads us still through all. This is what even in that famous letter of Dilip Kumar Roy, Sri Aurobindo writes. Behind all the anomalies of the world, there is a guidance. And this guidance is far too complex. The wisdom is far too universal for the little human mind to conceive. And that operate. This is the security of the soul. He is answering her question, that the soul's security is that there is a divine presence. There is a divine wisdom which operates, and we may not know it, we may rebel against it, but the better way is to align towards it. Then life can be beautiful. A conscious power has drawn the plan of life. There is a meaning in each curve and line. So, the graph of evolution is foreseen in the transcendent plane. Now time will unfold it. Time is simply a manager. God has given him the blueprint. Execute. Now material is where? Material, he calls the gods, says, please help me in the process. So gods, some are masons, some are, they will bring the cement. All the gods have to now build it. They have to do it because it's been foreseen in the transcendent. And then where will the material will come from? So material has to be provided by the person who wants the house to be built. So if I want a house to be built, I have to contact a person who will draw the blueprint. And then it will be given to the chief engineer. And that engineer will supervise, and material will be provided. The money I have to provide. So my thoughts and feelings become the material. But it has to be built, that original plan. So when the plan is not according to, or the material is not sufficient, then what does the builder do? Sir, money is over, I can't help it. Kas. So we have no kas. So we have to die with that plan in our head. Maybe next life. So next life again it comes. And so on and so forth. It's not perfectly to our liking. But that original plan will impose itself again and again and again. Till eventually it is fulfilled. That's what is time's role, and this is our role. So we have seen that how the gods are sacrificing our thoughts and feelings into the universal yagna. A conscious power has drawn the plan of life. There is a meaning in each curve and line. It is an architecture high and grand. We see a small little thing and we think, oh, it's not attractive. Obviously. Wait. How long, sir? Another 300 years, 1000 years, wait. After all, great building, grand architecture, grand. It is an architecture high and grand, by many named and nameless nations built. Some of them we know, Vishwakarma. But there are many gods who have not even been named. By many nations, named and nameless, in which unseen hands obey the unseen. So, we will see that when people are making a high building, so it's very strange. They put a scaffolding and all that, and then at different levels there are men and women standing in a queue. And this fellow will throw a pot full of those concrete or some bricks to the other lady, and the lady picks it up and throws it to the other man, and so on it goes on. It's an amazing scene to watch. Actually, it's music in stone. And you wonder what a perfection. They don't miss it. If they miss it, God knows what is going to happen. Unseen hand. They don't even know who is throwing. It's such a mechanical and perfected task that this lady throws, and then next, like a juggler, the hand is here and pop the hand. It's a perfect image of what Sri Aurobindo is describing. Unseen hands. But whom are they obeying? Obey the unseen. Those ladies and men who are working don't even know who is the Malik. They only know the person who disburses the payment. They know the contractor. They don't know who is that is unseen. If you ask them that who is the owner of this building, we don't know. We know the contractor, he gives us the money. But unseen. So even unseen hand, even the little entities, the lower vital forces, Sri Aurobindo speaks of that in Kingdoms and Goddess of the Little Life. And they create all kinds of chaos, accidents, etc. But even the hands of the unseen obey the unseen. So even they are obeying somebody somewhere which they don't know. So this is beautiful to remember. We'll just read it quickly. Time's unforeseen event, God's secret plan. This world was not built with random bricks of chance. A blind God is not destiny's architect. A conscious power has drawn the plan of life. If we look at the human body or anything in this world, we can see it. That this cannot be simply, even in a small thing like a white ant, the termite, those high things they make in forest. I didn't know this. Few days back I learned reading a jungle book. In jungle, if you lose the way, normally they say that you mark the trees. So that when you are returning, you see the mark. Now, if you don't mark the trees, then what do you do? So you see the termites. Now, all these termites, these ant hills, their ant hills are built only in north-south direction and not east-west. God knows who tells them this. They make it like that. So you can know the direction without a compass if you just notice the ant hills. Only thing is you have to step on them. That's little price they have to pay, because otherwise you can't see, which way they are built. And then you will see that they are built in a certain direction, a line. And you can get to know the direction simply by observing. Now look at even smallest of creation carries within it the sense of a conscious intelligence, which the scientist denies because he doesn't want to see it or cannot see it or whatever. but they are beginning to see it. So here is, it's not a random power, a conscious power has drawn the plan of life. There is a meaning in each curve and line. It is an architecture, high and grand, by many named and nameless masons built, in which unseeing hands obey the unseen, and of its master builders she is one. There are some who are part of that huge plan, deliberately, who have been chosen. That's what Mother says, that many are called. It's in the Bible and she quotes it. She says, very true. Many are called, but few are chosen. So she is a chosen one. Chosen ones are like that. Like Arjuna, many are called on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, who have to shed their blood from both sides for a new creation to emerge. But who is the chosen one? Pandavas and particularly Arjuna. He is the chosen one. So of its master builders, she is one. And then follows, because Queen has ultimately, it has all started with her anguish for a daughter. Queen, strive no more to change the secret will. Time's accidents are steps in its vast scheme. What a reassuring something for us. Bring not thy brief and helpless human tears across the fathomless moments of a heart that knows its single will and God's as one. Savitri is no ordinary mortal. Now he is bringing it back to Savitri, the avatar. That she is aligned to God. Don't worry about her. Somebody whose life is so beautifully aligned is carried. Divine will look after. Don't worry. And slowly he'll reveal the full avataric aspect of Savitri. It can embrace its hostile destiny. It sits apart with grief and facing death, affronting adverse fate, armed and alone. We see Sri Aurobindo's life. Nirodha asks him, why don't you cure yourself? Can't tell you, you won't understand. Sits alone and fronting it. In this enormous world standing apart, in the mightiness of her silent spirit's will, in the passion of her soul of sacrifice, her lonely strength facing the universe, affronting fate, asks not man's help nor God's. Now, directly we are brought closer and closer to the greatest mystery, the mother. Ask no help. All the gods were there when she would give meditations. They would come and sit. Mother has spoken about it. They would come for the meditation. And they asked Mother, we can see you are wanting to bring a new creation on earth. We also want to help. Mother said, very good. Would you like to take up a human body? No. Only Krishna agreed. He said, all right. He fuses with Sri Aurobindo. Shiva said, I will help you, but not take a human body. Shiva doesn't take a human body. Krishna is an evolutionary. He helps the evolutionary march. That's why sometimes Krishna and Shiva as if stand at loggerheads, but eventually they fulfill the same plan. But Krishna is an evolutionary avatar. He carries through the evolutionary process. So he agreed. No other god agreed. So what she could ask? Then those vital entities who were throwing stones at ashram, they also said, Mother, we want to help you. So Mother said, what can you do? They said that we can throw stones. Mother said, I don't need you. Please go back to wherever you come from. Then Lord Ganesha also wanted to help. What can you do? I can get money. She said 5 years he kept his promise. Money kept coming. Then 6th year it suddenly started running dry. So she had forgotten about it, that Ganesha had given the promise. Suddenly Ganesha appeared. Then she remembered, he had given a promise, but what happened this year? So she asked Ganesha, what happened? He said, what to do? My influence only extends over India. So I can't, the others are not receptive. They don't want to empty their pockets. So this is small work. Imagine confronting death. What gods can help? And humans. She says in one of the visions, somebody saw that there is a carriage which is carrying the driver and somebody sitting there with great difficulty uphill. So the person who is sitting there suddenly gets down and starts to push the carriage. Then the driver says, don't do that, don't do that. You come, sit inside. So mother interpreted this vision, explained in a very beautiful way. She said, it's the journey, evolutionary journey, the yoga of transformation. She says, in any case, even for the driver, it is not easy. He is carrying the coach. So if you get down and you think you can push a little bit and help it, it's a mistake. And yet the divines sometimes allow us only to make us feel good. Like Krishna says, okay, you want to hold this mountain with your sticks, hold it, it's okay. You want to have the joy, all right, fine. So this is just a joy given to us, nothing else. There should be no illusion that we are doing mother's work, helping in something. This is all illusion. But she allows us the joy of participating in a venture which she has already accomplished. That's all. But if we have the illusion, then there is a problem. Then we will be put down to ground level to understand. And then the fullness of the avatar. Sometimes one life is charged with earth's destiny. It cries not for succor from the time-bound powers. Alone she is equal to her mighty task. How can the time-bound powers, even gods are time-bound powers, how can they help in something which has been decreed from a plane beyond time? How can they help? They can help a little bit, but not change, not the real fight. Alone she is equal to her mighty task. Intervene not in a strife too great for thee, a struggle too deep for mortal thought to sound. Its question to this nature's rigid bounds, when the soul fronts nude of garbs the infinite. Its too vast theme of a lonely mortal will, piecing the silence of eternity. Nobody can help in that great work, mission of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Some sadhaks have written to Sri Aurobindo. One of famous one is Motilal Roy, who wanted to, I want to help in your work, mission. Sri Aurobindo said, it's very difficult. He did not encourage. He said, come here, open to Mother. That's more than enough. That is the big help. That you are providing a material on which we can work upon. But if you believe that we can help in the mission, he said it's too difficult a work. And still he tried, and we know what happened. Totally lost way, and the ego got the hold, and whatever happened later on that we know is history. So how dangerous it can be. And then these few lines after which we will stop. As a star uncompanioned moves in heaven, unastonished by the immensities of space, traveling infinity by its own light. At the ashram, Sri Aurobindo and the mother in one room, sending waves of light and love to the other end of the universe. So, traveling infinity by its own light. You don't have to physically go. Just as a star emits the light which will travel all across the universe. It has that power. That's why it's not astonished by the immensity of space. The great are strongest when they stand alone. Interesting paradox. Savitri loves him. She is married. Where is she alone? Now, if you notice Sri Aurobindo's writings, it's very interesting. In one place, Ishavasya Upanishad, Sri Aurobindo speaks about, in a guru-student dialogue, he speaks about love. And he says to the Guru tells the student, say not that the love of Rama and Sita, Ruru and Savitri exist not or are mere imagination. It's interesting. He says Rama and Sita. He doesn't say Ruru and Priyambada. He doesn't say Savitri and Satyavan. One being is charged. So aloneness is a state of being. As Nalinida writes at one place, chastity is not a condition of the body. It is a state of consciousness. So similarly, aloneness is not a condition. One can be with a whole army and yet alone. And one can be alone outwardly, yet crowded with all kinds of flowers that are scentless. So here so beautifully that Savitri is strongest, now referring to her being, the great are strongest when they stand alone. A God-given might of being is their force. A ray from self's solitude of light the guide. The soul that can live alone with itself meets God. This is one of the signs known in spiritual literature. The Gita authenticates it. The mother confirms this. One sign that we are ready to meet the divine, or we are ready to walk the spiritual path, is that we are not frightened of being alone. It doesn't mean that we shut ourselves being alone, but we are not frightened. We are happy, comfortable, at ease. The soul that can live alone with itself meets God. But if we are chatpat in that state, then we are not ready. It has nothing to do with people. The mother had married twice. What does it matter? She is still alone. Sri Aurobindo was married. He is still alone in the vastness with all those who are surrounding him. Friends, disciples, devotees. But what is teacher? As a star moved uncompanioned in the night. The soul that can live alone with itself meets God. Its lonely universe is their rendezvous. A day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart left soul to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge, alone with death and close to extinction's edge. We'll pause here and we'll read an experience of the mother which exactly confirms these lines. So we'll meet after 10 minutes again and continue.